What's good, everybody? Welcome into a live edition of the Coast to Coast podcast here on InsideCarolina.com. I am Joey Powell. We are brought to you by Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-Shirt.com. All right, I'm glad everybody's here. Appreciate you making time for us tonight. As always, with us, Sean Moran and Sherrell McMillan. We haven't done a live one of these in quite some time, and apologize for the scheduling issues last night. We usually do these on a Sunday evening recorded that they hit your podcast and YouTube feeds late Sunday night and early on Monday. I had something come up, family related, so wasn't able to get it done. So I apologize for the curveball, but appreciate everybody kind of rolling with us and still being here tonight. If you have not yet, you can still get on in here in the chat. We'll try to monitor that as best we can. But you know the drill. Inside Carolina's Coast to Coast podcast, Sherrell and Sean join me. We talk UNC basketball. We talk recruiting a little bit, but basically it's really just we want to hit all the news that's fit to discuss with UNC basketball. So first things first, I would be remiss if we didn't discuss the news that came out today of one of UNC's best post players of all time passing away, Eric Montross, succumbing to cancer yesterday at 52 years old. Certainly, everybody remembers Eric as a player. We're probably the most famous guy to wear double zero at UNC. He was also a color guy for the radio network for quite some time. I'm sure that Jones and Adam will have a lot of great things to say on the network, on their podcast and as they do their shows this week. But understandably, those guys are probably going to be struggling a little bit. So we'll do the best that we can to acknowledge and spend a little bit talking about Eric and his legacy, both as a basketball player and as a man. You may remember it was announced back in the late spring that Eric had been diagnosed with a very aggressive form of cancer. And he did put out a very encouraging video to the fans at late night, or I'm sorry, at Live Action with Hubert Davis back in October. Seem to be doing well, but obviously, as cancer goes, y'all know how this can affect people and how quickly things can go. So, just want to take a second and acknowledge not only the player that Eric Montross was, but also the guy. First off, I'll go to Sherrell and Sean and see, do you guys want to share some of your favorite Eric Montross player memories? I know there's, in looking at social media today, everybody's had some. And the beautiful dialectic about his passing is that it hurts, right? Like everybody that's a fan of the program and that appreciates Carolina basketball and has followed Carolina basketball, it's interacted with Eric, hurts to hear of his passing. But the flip side of that is that it's forced everybody to share all these really amazing stories, not only from his playing career and how they interacted with him and maybe as a recruit coming to Carolina, but how people have gotten to know him as he's been around the program. So, Sherrell, I'll come to you first. You have an Eric Montross memory you want to share, and it could be on the court or off. Either way is fine.
Yeah, I think you said it pretty well, Joey. Just a really sad day for Carolina basketball and those of us who follow it and cover it. I didn't have the pleasure of knowing him personally. He was before my time at UNC, and then I guess I left UNC as far as athletics are concerned right around the time when he started doing color commentary. So obviously you remember him as a player just because Coach Smith beat out Bob Knight for a kid born in Indiana who, was destined to play at Indiana. So, like, from the recruiting side, there's always that part of it that's cool that, it eventually helped pave the way for Sean May and Tyler Zeller as, big guys from Indiana who come to UNC and win national championships. So there's that part of it. I think for me, honestly, like I think I was 9 or 10 when Carolina won the national championship in '93. So, like, I remember him, but I don't remember him quite in the way, that you do when you get older. I remember him now because I travel a lot, and I drive a lot across the state for various reasons, and so I'm always listening to the Taro Sports Network, trying to find games and, um, trying to just understand what's going on. The Kentucky game, I had to listen to that on the Tar Heel Sports Network because I was driving home from Raleigh, down to Charlotte. So, most of my memories now are of him as a color commentator. And it's just weird because he was such a good player, but it's been so long since he played at Carolina that you kinda remember him for his I guess you would call that his 3rd or 4th career. I'm sure you'll talk about some of the, philanthropic stuff he did, but I remember him almost as a color analyst as much as a basketball player just because it coincides with me kind of, being older. And he was I loved him on the color commentary because he made sure to get his point across. Like, you know, Jones would say something like, Carolina just scored and it's 78-73. And Eric would make sure that he pinpointed exactly what happened. And if it took a little time through the free throws, he'd be making his point, and then he would say, Lawson make the first free throw, and then he would continue on with his point. Lawson made the second free throw, so he would just keep going until he got his point across, and I always found that funny.
Not everybody can segue to doing live basketball. I don't think I could do it, and I know it's a doing color is very unique because you have to bring a perspective that not everybody has, and he had that, having been successful at the highest level. And guy had a 8 or 9 year NBA career, was the definition of a true big in the in the 90s in the NBA, and played for some good teams. But yeah, I think you're right, Cheryl. He was always good to toe that line of not being too saccharine about what was going on the court, but you could still tell that he was a Carolina basketball player, a Carolina alum, and a fan, and that was a beautiful part of it.
Yeah, he would always get like a "woo baby" in or something
Yeah.
after a dunk. Like, if you go back and listen to, Coach K's last game at, Cameron, like, the second
Mhm.
half, he's just kinda yelling.
Oh,
And
he's
it's
he's
fun.
all
You
in.
Yeah, you can feel it coming through the radio. So I just those kind of special things. And again, it's crazy because he was such a great player at UNC. He played in the NBA a long time, and for me, I kinda remember him as a color analyst, and I'm just not realizing that.
Yeah, but again, like that's what unfortunately his untimely passing is getting everybody to remember how good he was at so many things. Sean, do you have a memory of Eric that jumps out at you, be it from his playing career, professionally or in college or even as a color commentator?
Nothing specific, but I think similar to Sherrell, he's probably for me the first UNC player that you really remember. I was like 8 or 9 when they won the '93 championship game, so I think it was probably '91, '92, '93 when you actually remember those games you're watching. So he's kind of the obviously there's Michael Jordan and all the guys you read about, but in terms of watching, really the first guy that you remember right off the bat, just in terms of watching at that age and what he was able to do in the '93 championship, and then playing video games while he's in the NBA, NBA Live, whatever it was back then. I think for
NBA
me,
Jam, you could play him against a werewolf in one of the games. Like there was a cheat code where you could play against like a werewolf and oh God, what was a mummy and something else like an NBA Jam, like a Halloween mode. But he could play like literally play against those characters. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
well, I don't know if I got that far on NBA Jam, but in terms of Pet always been more of a TV guy, but it's always fun to see him at the games. They would always flash to him, and to see, as Sherrill mentioned, the NBA career, but then coming back and how ingrained he was into not just the basketball system, but UNC in general, and also on Inside Carolina, reading about all the donations and the fundraisers and the camps that he always did for the Children's Hospital. I thought was always pretty cool. Giving back the way he did. So I think those are the things that when you say Eric Montross, obviously the 00, the size, but just being really the first UNC lasting memory, as well as what he was able to do off the court as well.
I think that's a really well put way to say that, Sean. I think it is a combination of a lot of things. I'll actually open up a little bit. My full time gig, I was able to actually interact with Eric some. Just our paths crossed in a lot of different ways. But I think looking at social media today and reading all these stories about Eric, a lot of them are not about basketball. And Adam Lucas wrote a great thing about telling stories about Eric and how so much of his legacy doesn't involve basketball because he was so plugged into the community. I think he was probably the epitome of what North Carolina fans would call a Carolina guy, in a sense that didn't get in trouble, was a great figure in the community, had a great basketball career, did things the right way. But going back to his work in the community, if you read all the things about him today, everybody seemed to have some sort of interaction with him, whether it was just him being nice as a guy, taking time for people, listening to people's stories about their first memories of him, and He had a great memory about remembering people, and that was something that people always said about Dean Smith as well. But Eric did a lot in this community. As soon as he basically left Chapel Hill, and matter of fact, when he was still in Chapel Hill, he was doing things um, for the Clark Teen Room at the UNC Children's Hospital, and that was somebody that touched him, and he felt like, all right, we need to raise money and make a teen room in the Children's Hospital, and that's still there today on the seventh floor at UNC Children's. There's a lot
It
of other work that. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'll jump in after you.
Okay. One of the other things that people may not know about is as all the things you read today, they're all true, and they're also just a fraction of the stuff that he did in the community. Again, having some personal interaction on the philanthropic side of things, I can tell you there was a lot of stuff that Eric and his wife Laura and his kids did in this community that nobody will ever find out about because it's just he wasn't about the praise. He wasn't about doing things to get credit. He was doing it because it was the right thing. It was because he felt like it was what they should do. Um, so I think the biggest thing is just recognizing he was 7 foot tall, 260 some odd pounds, 280 probably at his biggest, but he was so much bigger than that. If you can actually, wrap your head around that. He was literally a larger than life guy because of what he did for so many folks off the court, whether it be raising money for UNC and through the Rams Club, whether it was, helping to get funds for additions for the basketball facilities, whether it was working for UNC Children's Hospital. He was on the board for a lot of other nonprofits, a lot of them built around pediatric health causes. He was just that kind of guy that if you were around him, you knew the value of doing for others and you knew the value of doing all the time for other people. So I think that's probably going to be his legacy, amongst other things. And as people that are better at this than I am start eulogizing him and sharing their stories, and I'm sure there will be a service at some point, and people will probably get excerpts from what's said about Eric there. There's going to be a bunch of stuff that comes out about him, and people are just going to be have their minds blown because of what a big figurative person that he was based on his impact and how many people he touched. Sure, I'll go ahead, man.
One thing and this is my final thing. Well said again, Joey. I think it's interesting. One thing people loved about Roy Williams on the recruiting trail is that when he would go to a gym, let's say he was in Laurinburg or Lumberton or Maxton or somewhere down there, like he would be the rock star in the gym. He would stay in the gym and take pictures with every single person until everybody got the picture they wanted. So today I'm on my social media feed and I feel like, again, I didn't know Eric, really
Mhm.
at all outside of his Carolina persona, but it feels like he must have been the same way because I promise you, I feel like everybody I follow has a picture where 7 foot Eric Montross is
Yes,
right here and
yes.
they're right here and he's smiling and you give him a hug or something. So I thought that was interesting because those are the type of people who will stay for, the last kid to get an autograph or the last person to get a picture who kind of whose reputation precedes them. And I think that's what I saw a lot of is that you knew this was a good person because there was like not anyone. There's always someone who's gonna
Everybody's got a
antagonize.
story.
Yeah, but there's always someone who's gonna antagonize or always someone who's gonna be negative, and there hasn't been a single person with
Yeah.
Eric. 'Cause that's how you know that a great person will be missed.
Well, I'll leave this for a lot of other folks to be able to share their thoughts in the coming days and weeks. But certainly on behalf of Sean and Sherrell and the entire IC family, we want to send our best, warmest, strongest vibes and positive light towards Laura and his kids as they go on without him. And it is nice to see that he passed with so many people in his family around him because he did so much for so many while he was here. And so I just say, Tar Heel fans, hug your people tonight. If you feel so moved, I'm sure there will be opportunities to give in Eric's honor and Eric's memory in the upcoming days. So just keep your eyes out for social media there. But yeah, take time to acknowledge the big thing, the things that the big guy did for UNC, and if he had an impact on your life, awesome. Even if it was just as being a fan, just make sure to recognize and enjoy those memories because we've all only got one take at this thing. Thanks for humoring us. I know that's a little heavy and hard to start, but we felt like we would be remiss if we didn't at least acknowledge the impact that he had on the North Carolina basketball community. Fellas, there's not really an easy way to do this, so I'm going to go ahead and shift into talking about the game against Kentucky this past weekend. North Carolina falls to 7-3, losing 87-83 to the Wildcats in a game that looking at social media, I think opinions were all over the place. A lot of folks were telling me I'm being too positive and I was being too soft, and moral victories or whatever. But um, however you want to slice it, it's North Carolina against a ranked opponent. They lost after doing some good things, but also doing some bad things. So first things first, Sean, I'll go to you. What did you see that caused this loss for North Carolina? Kind of on a primary aspect, what was the top one or two things that caused this? I mean, we could slice this for a couple hours and look at this turnover or that missed assignment. But what were the one or two things you feel like really dictated the outcome of this ball game?
We talked about the athleticism and size concerns coming in, but I think more when you from the opening possession, it was the lack of, I guess, focus. Focus is the right word in terms of they were sloppy early on. I think in this type of game, it was clear that Kentucky was the more talented team, but they were definitely not as crisp of a team like a UConn. So I think even though they're more talented, if UNC had been sharper mentally, that they wouldn't have been playing from behind all game. And to me, that's shown out in the turnovers. That's shown out first time this season. The assist to turnover ratio has been less than one, negative. So I think really it was that started the game a little sloppy, whether maybe they were nervous, whatever it may be, but they didn't come out focused. And I think that continued all the way through the final possession, which was shown either in the defensive rebound that went off, went out of bounds, or obviously the last play call. But I think with all those mishaps, that's how you get down double digits and you're fighting your way back. Which at halftime only down two. I mean that was a huge win, given how I thought poorly they had played, and then they get down quickly again and fight back. But once again, I think if they were crisper, more mentally focused, it could have been a different story. Maybe not. But the only other thing, the transition play, I think this was something last year that drove me crazy was the lack of passing in transition, and I found myself yelling at the TV some more. And there were a few opportunities where they did score without passing the ball. I think Elliott got a layup, Cormac, and even the first half comeback, which started with RJ assist to Cormac. But in large part, way too much dribbling in transition. Didn't look to pass the ball, move it quick, and I think that was just. I'm not going to say selfishness, but it was not a reflective of the team I've seen this year and how they've been playing together.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. I think you could argue that the team had energy to start, but I think as far as like intensity and focus, yeah, I agree with you. And I think Dewey said maybe on the post game with Tommy Ashley here on IC that it seemed like the team was just a little too fast, maybe a hair too quick, maybe just kind of had that old Clydesdale on roller skates type action going on the floor where they're just not quite there. You can see they were gripping just a little bit. Sherrell, I'll go to you the same thing. What did you see that you felt like caused this game to kind of tip towards Kentucky when a lot of things seem to indicate that North Carolina would come in pretty focused?
You know, honestly, it came down to things I didn't really expect. Didn't expect you. I know that Kentucky is great at getting you to turn the ball over, but I didn't expect UNC to struggle, especially in the first half. I think they had 11 or 12 in the first half, and I mean the other team is getting shots and getting offensive rebounds, and you're not even getting the ball on the rim. So that's probably number one. We entered it talking about Kentucky shooting from three, like, oh, they're such a great shooting team. Both teams had 8 threes, so UNC was fine there. The foul line was basically the same. It's just Kentucky had so many more opportunities to score than UNC did because of the offensive rebounds and because of the turnovers. So I I I don't know. That was not the way I saw that game playing out, honestly. I think UNC as a team has to rebound better. I mean, that's pretty obvious. I don't know exactly how they go about doing that, considering the lineup they play the most. We've talked about it ad nauseum. Is a smaller lineup. I think you saw the athleticism difference between the two teams. Pretty glaring. Not quite JV versus varsity, but there was a pretty big difference. So part of it is just the makeup of UNC's team, and then a part of it is they were just unusually sloppy. I think, on Saturday. You add all that together, plus Armando not having his best game, and it's kind of a miracle they were down by 2 and then,
Mhm.
had the ball with a chance to tie with, I think, 10 seconds left in the game. I don't really know how it happened. I guess the free throw line helped a ton. All that to say, eh, I think the angst that you're feeling, Joey, from the fan base, if I can go back into my
Yeah, no, man,
psychologist and
you're
and
you're
sit
you're taking me right where I wanna go.
yeah,
Fire away.
yeah, if I can sit the fan base down on the couch and, take notes and listen to them, I think it's the same issue. It's like they want this team to be good, and they know this team is different, and they know that this team fought back, but fighting back isn't just good enough anymore
Mhm.
because UNC has had, frankly, 5 years that are beneath what the UNC program expects to
Yeah.
be. Hubert Davis has talked about a standard and talked about what UNC expects, and I don't think either side is wrong. I think the people who are like, "Yeah, UNC," I think the number is 13 and 31 in Q1 games the last 4 or 5 years, yeah, that's not good, obviously. Um, I think the side that says UNC, the expectations have changed because it feels like they come into these big games not even expecting to win or the fans don't expect them to win. I think that's fair. I think that's kinda accurate because right now, Kentucky is a more talented team, like Sean said. I
Mhm.
also think that you do have to separate this team because it is so new, and I know we talked about it. We had a service for it a couple weeks ago that we have to move on from it, but I think the fans just aren't able to uncouple the 2 because of Armando Bacot and RJ Davis still being on the team. So, it's a weird situation where I think both sides are right, where, yes, this UNC team is better. They've improved. They played UConn relatively close. They were right there with Kentucky. They fight back. They have a different style, but it's still kind of a similar result.
Yeah.
So I think that's where the consternation is kinda coming in. Again, I don't think either side is wrong. I think if you wanna argue that UNC just isn't the same program and the Kentucky game is a reason why, I think you have enough ammunition to argue that side. If you wanna say, one game, a team a little bit more talented than them, beat them and made some tough shots, I think you're right too. So it's all of that, and that's where I think that angst that you're seeing in your timeline and talking to people comes from.
Yeah, and I think it's okay to be upset with the loss, right? Like that's fanhood. I think recognizing the flaws in that game are absolutely okay too. Sean pointed out a couple of good ones. You threw some out there too, Sherrell. I mean, the focus, the rebounding is concerning. And UNC's inability to react when Kentucky started going, running pick and roll stuff or trying to just keep switching until they got the matchup they wanted. That was frustrating. So I think it's okay for fans to be frustrated. I think where I stop is I can't go any farther to that point of like everything is terrible and this team is exactly the same as they've been the last 5 years and and this is the same as last year because I just I don't see that. Sean, I'm coming to you from a very I want you to give me a very antiseptic look at this. What of this team's flaws as we sit here, mid to late December? What of this team's flaws that we saw against Kentucky are fixable in your opinion?
Well, well, I think we saw the turnovers. I wouldn't say that has been a staple. They've been pretty good this year. I mean, I think from a offensive, well, offensive perspective, they're still playing well, top 10 offensively and offensive efficiency. I think the good thing was seeing Cormac Ryan play very well, especially after us talking about what's wrong with Cormac Ryan. So I think hopefully that layoff gave him some rest. I thought he did look a little bouncier and more confident in the shot, which we talked about last week. But then you have Harrison Ingram, who at the same time struggled. I think the athleticism for him was a big issue. It was a little quick on his shots. Obviously, struggled attacking the basket. So I think now if you can somehow start to get those guys playing consistently with RJ Davis, then that's three plus Armando. But defensively, there's been a lot of talk. Do they need to stop switching 1 through 4? Is that giving up easy baskets? And I think for me, I'd rather see them try to fight through a little bit more. Now, if they have to switch or they need to hedge, etc., then they should do that. But I wouldn't mind seeing them fight through a little bit more in those situations. I think at the beginning of the play, it doesn't allow for any easy opportunities right off the bat for the offense, but as they work it 3, 4, 5 passes, they are able to get into those positions they want. And I think Oklahoma will be interesting in terms of how they operate. In terms of the rebounding, I think, I was surprised initially when they put Zayden high in, but it made sense. I was hoping to see a little more than just 2 minutes, and I think he could have been a guy who could have played the four, added some size, not given up a lot defensively, and seeing how that could have affected the boards because I think Jeff Vance just commented on it, but more often than not, they are out of position in terms of the rebounding.
Yeah.
And Armando, as great as he is defensively on the rebounding perspective, sometimes he was out of position. If he was out of position, then they had no hope, jumping against guys much taller, much more athletic. So I
Well, you
think,
saw I hate to interrupt you, but you
uh,
saw exactly what you're saying on that next to last rebound of the game, where UNC held them down to like a 3-second, violation or whatever, and you end up where RJ Davis is on the back of a bigger guy because they had switched everything. And to your point, that's one more second chance that actively, if you take that away, maybe changes the outcome of the game. Who knows? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, I mean, that was, I think, really it from a defensive rebounding perspective and defensive perspective. But that's obviously an area they need to improve upon. Offensively, they're not going to be hitting on all cylinders 100% of the time. They can definitely get better. I think get back to the ball movement they had, but defensively is the area that they're going to have to show bigger growth in terms of becoming a legit tournament team.
Sherrell,
I'll
I'm gonna,
jump.
I'm gonna.
I'll
Yeah, go ahead.
I was
Sorry,
gonna say
I
I was
muted
I was
myself.
gonna jump in too. I think a lot of people have questions about the switching and that being the defensive style, and obviously I'm not like basketball X and O's guy. Like I know a little bit, but and I'd love to discuss this with Trevor. But I was talking with someone today, and basically they were like, you switch because you want to control the effect that screening has on the defense, and UNC guys are evidently taught to push on their switches, which is literally like push the guy into the switch. Like you push your guy into the switch. And what's happening right now from this person I talked to, they're saying that UNC is pointing on their switches, which is just like, hey, let's switch. And in doing so, you're not disrupting the flow of the offense because the whole point of screens and everything is to create actions that give you an advantage. So it gives you 3-on-2 or 2-on-1 or whatever. And so UNC's guys, because they're not pushing on the switches, they're pointing. Evidently, what this causes is freedom of movement, and that's how you get guys from Villanova and Connect and the guy from Arkansas and all these players just going downhill with freedom to the rim. So I think the goal makes sense. The person I talked to said it's a sound strategy. It's what most people do, but UNC just isn't fully executing the game plan. And yes, it does result in some mismatches. It results in slips to the rim often, and it can hurt rebounding. But overall, the goal is to kind of prevent those open shooters and to prevent guys getting downhill. And right now, it's not quite working, but I think the strategy is sound, and I think they can improve at it. But as we talked about, there's just certain things that can improve. There are some just physical limitations. So
Right.
they're gonna have to kind of work through that.
I
And y'all can
I mean,
correct me if I'm. Go ahead, Sean.
I was gonna say, brought up kind of 2 points along with seeing some of the comments. One from a defensive perspective, I I thought they could have gone to the press either in the first half or earlier in the second half. Going to it up one, I thought was not the right time. It also allowed Kentucky to speed up, get ahead of the defense, and that resulted in Bradshaw getting the offensive rebound and going back up, which
Yeah.
led to the 6-0 run versus a half court set. Granted, in that then half court set, they were pretty much isolating on the defenders and hitting their shots. The other thing early on, I mean, Kentucky, you got 5-star Central, the guys that already have 1 foot out the door into the NBA, and they're diving onto the floor after loose balls.
Exactly.
Like they're fourth year seniors, etc. So I think that is something that Carolina can control in terms of how aggressive are you, the more aggressive team. or are you the one dictating that aggressiveness, which we've talked about a few times?
And that was the one thing I think hearing Hubert Davis's comments and knowing that the team had some tough practices last week, I thought would be a little more obvious against Kentucky. And for whatever reason, it wasn't. You can hash that until everybody's blue in the face. Um, it's funny, Sherelle, you talk about UNC doing the situation where they're switching seemingly everything. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think this has been something. I think this is new to UNC this year, and I think one of the things that has been a knock on Carolina in the past is they leave too many perimeter shooters open, and a lot of that, getting perimeter shooters open was because UNC was staying home on screens and were getting screened pretty badly. So this is kind of the flip side, I guess, a little bit of UNC growing into learning how to switch everything, or at least switching more than they historically have been. Go ahead, Sherrell.
And again, to do a psychoanalysis on the fan base, it's very jarring because everyone is for so long is so used to Roy Williams. Priority 1 is rebounding, priority 2 is rebounding, priority 3 is running faster, priority 4 is rebounding. And there were teams I don't want to say much smaller than this, but teams with comparable size under Roy Williams under a different philosophy who, led the country in offensive rebounding percentage and defensive rebounding percentage.
Mhm.
And I think it's different because it is a different style. And even though this is year 3, we're all still adjusting to how Hubert Davis wants to play. And it is a different style. So I think that's part of it too.
Yeah.
When your bedrock principle for, almost 50 years has been we're going to come in and we're going to out rebound you with monsters in the paint. And then that changes, very quickly over the course of basically 2.5 years. I think that's another reason that it feels so jarring because they're not rebounding terribly. They're just rebounding kind of average. But at Carolina, for the last, like I said, 50 years, rebounding average just doesn't get it.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to have when you're playing straight up man-to-man defense and you're staying home on screens, it's easier to box out your man because you're on your man. And to your point from earlier, Sherelle, when you're getting switches, it's hard to box out your man when you're the one and you're guarding a five, and that can happen when you're switching everything. So it'll be interesting to see what gets tweaked and what gets changed because post game and then in what we've seen in comments from the players. Obviously they recognize that rebounding gave Kentucky a lot more possessions. Turnovers gave Kentucky a lot more possessions. So it'll be interesting to see how they change that. One of the kind of the prevailing rhetorics that I saw on the message boards and on social during and after the game was the thought about how this affects North Carolina's postseason resume. We're not going to use the word that we banned last week, but I can hear folks saying, much like last year when North Carolina was a bubble team, that you've got to win some of these games. True, North Carolina won against Tennessee, but lost against UConn and Kentucky, and that's accurate. I think they'll have a chance against Oklahoma. We'll talk about that in a second. But I don't think you can have it both ways. I think you can either believe that the ACC is going to be boo-boo trash garbage this year, in which case North Carolina should win most of their games, if not an overwhelming majority of them. Or you can worry about this team being a bubble team. I don't think we've seen a bubble team. I understand where folks are skittish and a little shell shocked from seeing last year where the resume just wasn't strong enough. But I think this year, especially if North Carolina is able to beat Oklahoma, who looks a lot better now than they did 3 weeks ago, I just don't see this team being a bubble team, especially considering what the conference looks like right now. Sean, I'm going to ask you: Is the resume a concern right now, knowing what we know about the ACC and based on what we've seen with the eye test from this team so far this year?
At this moment in time, no. I think the Oklahoma game is a game that most people, probably myself included, put as a W when you were going through the schedule early on, just given Oklahoma where the game is. I think they were in the 40s to 50s as well. Now here they are, one spot ahead in KenPom and top ten team. So this is a great resume opportunity. If they do lose to Oklahoma, then you're really 2-4 against solid teams, with one of those being Arkansas, who once again, who knows where they end up. And then it does not, I'm not saying it becomes dire, but it does become nerve wracking again, because you don't know where are those where are those quad one wins going to come from, while
Mhm.
also avoiding some of those bad losses. And I think it goes back to when we did the in-depth piece on the ACC, is that a lot of these teams aren't going to get the national respect, but they can, they can still
They
they
can
can
still
still
win.
be they can still win, especially when you start 3 games on the road. So I think I don't want to say a must win like we were using last year with the Ohio State game or Michigan the year before, but it's a can't lose. They can't lose it.
Yeah.
And if they do win, that'll be, at least for now, before they get into the Big 12 play, a strong a strong boost on the resume, which once again they didn't really have last year going in outside of Ohio State.
Yeah. Sure. I'll go ahead, man. You were gonna jump
I
in
was
on
gonna say,
something?
what's just below must win, like on the scale of like cliches about games. Whatever is just below must win is what I think
That's
this
what
is
it
for
is?
UNC. Yeah, so I don't. We'll have to figure it out before the end of the show. Whatever that one rung down is, because it feels a little like Ohio State last year to me. Not saying that this UNC team again. This is a completely different team. I think it's a better team.
Yeah.
But I do think when you start to look at the schedule, like Sean said, 3 straight road games to start ACC play. I mean, I I don't think losing 4 out of 5 over the next 3 weeks is like a scenario that shouldn't be discussed, because it's possible, because we've always say road games in the ACC are tough. Oklahoma's a good team. You should beat Charleston Southern. So, I mean, the color of what this season looks like could be pretty intact, by this time in 3.5 weeks. So, I think Wednesday is about as close as you can get to a must win in December. Not even because they might miss the tournament. I mean, they could miss the tournament, but more so just because you're still trying to flush away that taste from last year. I think the
Yeah.
players are too. You're still trying to get rid of it, and so finishing out a really good team, um, like Oklahoma, after the tough non-conference they've had, I think would be a boon for UNC. And let me add one thing too. I'm gonna look at the camera and I'm gonna put somebody on notice. The schedule makers, I guess Hubert Davis and whoever else in the Smith Center office, yeah,
Blank
they need to
Gwaltney.
chill it. Clint, y'all gotta relax a little bit. Like, I understand they want to play tough games in awesome venues across the country against big name teams, but I mean, this schedule is a gauntlet. It's been really, really tough for them. I mean, I saw somewhere, I think I wanna give proper credit. I can't remember the guy's name, so apologies. This is not me trying to take your stat. I think it was like it's the first time UNC's played 6 straight or 5 of 6 teams who are ranked, in a row or something like that. I'm completely messing it up. If you
Yeah.
guys find it, please put it in the chat. Um, so and then next year, they have a game at Rupp, and they're obviously gonna be in the CBS Sports Classic next year. They're gonna play either Tennessee, Kentucky, or Alabama in the ACC SEC
Mhm.
Challenge. They're going to Maui next year. So I don't know, man. There needs to be a few, no disrespect. There needs to be a few more Charleston Southerns in there in the Smith Center. And then also, if we're talking about that three-letter phrase that we won't mention, Wednesday's game is like the perfect game.
There you go.
It's a neutral game, but it's in
Mhm.
Charlotte against a good team. So if they win, it should be a Q1, for the majority of the season. Like, if I were doing the schedule again, and I'm not, those guys know what they're doing. Again, all due respect, but Carolina would be playing like kind of Power 5 teams in Greensboro and in Charlotte and in Richmond and in
Mhm.
Norfolk and maybe one in Raleigh and maybe one in Fayetteville. Like, Dave
Hey!
Manette, yeah, I had to
Hey,
get
hey,
it
hey,
in there.
watch your mouth. Watch your mouth.
Played in the Crown. But I think that's how you have to do it moving forward. Like, you can keep the same number of home games, but some of these non-conference tilts, you need to have those in what's considered technically neutral courts, but we know are
Yeah.
semi-neutral or almost home games. That's the way I think moving forward on the schedule you have to do things.
And I think Carolina fans trashed Duke for a long time for their scheduling, but there's a reason they did that. There's a reason they did it for so long exactly the way they did, playing neutral site games, in Greensboro, in Chicago, and in places where they had a predominantly heavy home crowd.
And well, then there wasn't even a benefit with the three-letter rankings, then. But now it makes sense. You've seen that's how you have to do it. You either
Right.
play in the Big 12, where it's gonna be a whole bunch of let me be nice. You play in the Big 12, where there's gonna be an opportunity for
Speak
a
your
lot of
mind,
quad-1
man.
wins,
Speak your mind.
or you go and you do this neutral court thing, and you just have to game the system a little bit, because I don't know that the ACC is going to be respected the way that we all think it should be. Like Clemson
Yeah.
last year, again, I think they won 14 games in the ACC and didn't make the NCAA tournament. That's absurd. So you got to kind of look at that, do your research, and then figure out a way, scheduling wise, to move forward that best fits your team for that particular year.
So one last thing I'll get in here before we hit a quick break. I do I do agree with you. I think that the Oklahoma game should give folks a pretty clear focus as what we're dealing with moving into the conference season as this team gets into 3 straight ACC road games. I can't go with the folks that are like that still have this birthright mentality of, we're North Carolina, we should be beating everybody. Like the other team has good scholarship players as well. It's okay to be frustrated, but like the birthright thought just doesn't exist in college basketball anymore. I mean, if you look at the teams that are in top of the NCAA right now, they're not necessarily blue blood squads from 10 years ago. This tournament thing that North Carolina just played in with UCLA and Ohio State, they're not even ranked right now. Kentucky was ranked, at 19th going into the game Saturday. So I look at folks that are still making all these statements about, you know, I understand the angst and the frustration that the program's not been where it has for the last 5 years, but I just don't see where. And Sherrell will attest to this. I'm not always known as a positive guy, but I've seen enough from this team to realize that they are better, I think, than a majority of the squads in the ACC, and that should play out over the next couple of weeks. Um, Sean, I'm going to ask you, what day is it in California right now?
Ready for
Come on, man, just answer the question, sir.
all right, Monday.
All right, what's the date out there? I don't know how things go in California.
18th.
It's the 18th. All right, so it's a week before Christmas. So that means you still have time to get Johnny T-shirt and get some stuff for that person on your list, that Tar Heel on your list that needs good gear. Johnny T-shirt, big sponsors of Inside Carolina. We want you to patronize them the same way they support us. Hit them up, johnnytshirt.com. They've been doing their 12 days of Christmas. You can absolutely snatch up some good last minute stocking stuffers, gifts there. They're running all kinds of crazy sales on and off, but their 12 days of Christmas thing it's had some sneaky good finds. Check them out. If you're around town, sneak up to Chapel Hill. They'll take care of you in person. I don't want to guarantee they can get you something because I don't know how the mail goes right now, but they're really quick in shipping. I will say that. So if you still need something for a week from today, go ahead and hit Johnny T-shirt up right now online, johnnytshirt.com. Use your 10% code on the premium message boards to get that little extra off the top, save some money. And you can use that money to throw around to, your friends and family when the big guy comes down the chimney in a few days. So hit up Johnny T-shirt. We appreciate their support. Take a quick break. Let some national ads drop in here. If you're live with us, stick around. The recorded edition will have some national advertisements, so hang tight. All right, Coast to Coast Podcast back with you. Thanks for being here. Appreciate everybody in the chat tonight throwing us the comments and the thoughts. Again, if you've got questions and you want us to try to answer something in the show, we will answer some good ones. Don't be giving us garbage questions. We don't need any of that. We all got kids. We have to deal with that stuff anyway. Been talking a little bit about the UK game and how North Carolina has things to work on. I do think there were some things they can build on going into Oklahoma. I saw Hubert Davis use Jalen Withers in a way that could be a positive moving forward. I saw Hubert Davis again get some positive results from using full court man-to-man and doing some full court trapping. So that'll be fun to watch. Sean, I have not watched Oklahoma yet this year, full confession, but I do know they're undefeated. They're 10-0, one of the few teams remaining that are undefeated in the country. As of today's AP poll, they're number 7. Sean, what can we expect from a strategy standpoint from an Oklahoma team that looks like they go legit 8 or 9 deep and get production out of that 8 or 9?
Yeah, they do go 8 or 9, and I think Porter Moser coming over from Loyola Chicago, he has put his stamp on the team now 3 years in, and I think he's gotten them to where he wanted them to defensively, top 10 team in terms of metrics. From a three point percentage, they play the three ball really well defensively. So teams right now are shooting under 26% against them. So that's definitely a focus point. So I think that is an area to watch. We always talk about the threes. They did hit the eight threes, but they did so at a 33% clip against Kentucky. So defensively, Oklahoma is strong, tough, and I think it'll provide UNC a good test. Offensively, Oklahoma is just as good, if not better, than UNC at this point in time in terms of how well they've been shooting the ball inside the 3-point line, and they love to attack in the pick and roll. So I think it'll be interesting. Their two guards are both playing really well, and they're going to attack, especially going left off the pick and roll. So it'll be interesting to see what UNC's strategy is because they like to do a lot of point guard center 1-5 pick and rolls and get Armando in there and see what happens. So I think from an individual talent perspective, UNC has it, but I think Oklahoma's a smart, tough, talented team. So it should be an interesting matchup in Charlotte.
Sherrell, what are you looking for? Are you still planning on going to the game, by the way?
I am not. Shouts to the Charlotte Sports Foundation for the prices. I'll say all I know, all I know about Oklahoma. Again, Porter, we know the
Billy
kind of
Tubbs, right?
defense. Yeah, we know Billy Tubbs. We know the kind of UNC beat Oklahoma. Eric Montross was on that team back in 1990 in the second
Rick
round.
Fox with 8
Yeah,
seconds
Rick
left.
Fox at the buzzer. That's probably the first game, like from start to finish, I actually remember. I remember
There you go.
Jeff Lebo and Kevin Madden, 86, 87, but from start to finish, I remember that game. But yeah, so Moser obviously plays that a physical style of defense. You know that. I know Hughley on the team. I don't know if y'all remember him. He was at Pittsburgh. That wonderful night in February 2 years ago when me and Joey declared that UNC season was over. Uh, we did the podcast. He had 18 points in the Smith Center that night. We said UNC was done. They're not going to accomplish anything. And a month later, they beat Coach K. And a month, 3 weeks after that, they make the Final Four. So that's really all I know about Oklahoma. Honestly, they have a wonderful, wonderful name on the team, Latre. I am just because his name is Latre. I'm anxious to watch him. He's a starter. He's a two guard. He's 6'4". So curious how that happens. From a UNC side, I think it's going to be a common refrain from us the entire season. The best defense is a humming offense, and you would hope that because it's going to be a UNC crowd, probably 90-10, 95-5, if not more than that, that will energize the team and they can get out and run because they have issues when they have to set up in the half court, in half court defense and play against the set offense because of the switching, because of the size
Mhm.
limitations. So the goal should be as much as possible to run, to push the tempo, to get more possessions and try to really just run them ragged. I think that's the key to victory for UNC is to just run to get in transition so that those limitations, the size on the perimeter and some of the rebounding issues don't really have a chance to fester.
Yeah, we've beaten it to death on this show already a couple of times this year, but the Roy Williams adage is correct. Everything looks better when the ball goes in the basket. North Carolina can get more than three guys, and it was even two against Kentucky, to have the ball going in the basket pretty frequently. They're going to be hard to beat against anybody. So maybe that's getting Cormac and RJ in a combination of Harrison Ingram and Armando Bacot, starting to feel themselves. I think that will do a lot for this team. And again, 4 point a 4 point swing, maybe two extra possessions against Kentucky, and the fan base and everybody's joining us in the chat tonight might think differently about this squad. It's hard to say, but it definitely will be paramount to see more effort, winning those 50-50 balls that seemed to go, Kentucky's way the other night. Making sure that they can counter the toughness like they saw against UConn, and just literally playing crisp, well-defined, intentional basketball is going to be what's required against an Oklahoma team. And again, yes, Sean pointed it out earlier. You nailed it. 3 weeks ago or preseason, but even as recently as 3 weeks ago, this Oklahoma game looked like a surefire win. And man, I don't know where Vegas is going to set this, but it's definitely looking a whole lot different as we sit here a week from Christmas. Guys, last little thing we'll touch on is some recruiting news. Sean, you were telling me, I think City of Palms started this week, and we've also got a lot of other recruiting holiday type tournaments going on. So why don't you throw out what you've seen there and what's really kind of catching your eye in the prep world?
But yeah, City of Palms starts the day with Link Academy down there. I'd say that's my favorite tournament, one I was able to go to for I think 10 straight years. Haven't been there in a few years, but we'll be checking out James Brown and some of the other other players down there. It used to be a Roy Williams staple to get down there for a day or two. And then yeah, I know there's going to be a lot of other local action as well, which I'm sure Sherrell can talk to. But City of Palms kind of gets everything going pre-Christmas, and then there's a lot that happens in between Christmas and New Year's as well.
I did also see this past weekend some really, really cush highlights from one Drake Powell in a game where I think he hit 30 pretty early on. Cheryl, anything else you want to add from the prep or recruiting side of things?
Yeah, like to your point about Powell, they're out in Oregon, Salem actually, playing in a tournament there, and then they'll be back in a couple days, and then after Christmas, they'll be in the John Wall Invitational in Raleigh, which is going to be kind of stocked full of a lot of local Carolina targets, including Drake Powell, Kendra Harrison, the tight end in 26, who, excuse me, 25. Wait, I'm not sure which class he's in. I forget. The super tight end who's ranked number one overall player in the country in football, and then a top 50 player in basketball. He's going to be playing. Jackson Keith's going to be there. Cole Clower is going to be there. So it's a pretty loaded event. Then the Chick-fil-A Classic is down in Columbia. AJ DePanza and Prolific Prep will be there, amongst others. Beach ball still goes on in Myrtle Beach. So there's 3 or 4 really good tournaments within, a few hours drive of Chapel Hill, Charlotte, if you're interested. And most of those all start on the 27th.
All right, appreciate that there update. All right, so I did get a couple of questions from the chat, and appreciate everybody who's been with us for most of the show. I'll hit these real quick. Either one of you can answer this as well. This comes from our guy Thomas Yancey. Do the Heels need to make lineup changes to fix the rebounding problems?
I don't think so, because I think it's a situation, we talked about it before, where when you put someone on the court who maybe specializes in rebounding, you're losing that much somewhere else. So I think it's more about fine tuning exactly when they maybe need rebounding and try to pinpoint, okay, this is the time when we really got to be solid on the boards and play it that way, as opposed to making a wholesale lineup change. I think you go with your most efficient offensive lineup, because that's your biggest strength. So you wouldn't, to use a football example, you wouldn't want to take Micah Parsons off the edge rushing the passer, because that's what he's best at. So you want to have whatever it is you're best at, you want to do that to the best of your ability. And I think that's why you keep the lineup the way it is.
Sean, you got any thoughts on that?
No, I wouldn't say in terms of changing the lineup. I just think trying to get people a little bit better in position to affect the game. I mean, I think Jalen Washington, he's been playing well at times, but you saw him catch the ball. I thought he was going to go straight up for a dunk, and he puts it on the floor and gets blocked. If you had to for Jalen Washington, Terrell, what's if you're like, all right, he has one shot. Like what shot do you want him taking?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I wanted to catch in the post. I want him to turn and face and take it from about 15 feet.
So he's only done that 3 times this whole season, and one of them
Yeah.
was maybe a little forced on Klingon, who goes 7-2.
Yeah.
So, I know he's expanded the game out of the three-point line, but there's an example of just 1 to 2 times, look to get him 12, 15 feet, jab step and face, because it's not gonna get blocked. So, there's a example maybe utilizing Jalen Washington a little better. I think putting Zayden High in, um, you know, just to get that experience rebounding and see what he can do given how he was playing early on. So I don't think a lineup needs to be changed. I think if we can get Cormac Ryan and Harrison Ingram going at the same time, that can do wonders offensively, and then kind of being smart with how things are shaking out throughout the game.
Yeah, and I do. I can appreciate Hubert Davis's He always talked about in his opening press conference he's going to go by feel, and we saw that a lot. Especially in the Final Four run where he got to where he just felt those 5 guys plus one for most of the tournament. And so now you can kind of see a little bit where he's feeling out where guys work. I mentioned the Jalen Withers use the other day. His usage rate was way up this past weekend against Kentucky, and so I've seen a little bit of that too. To see how he's kind of adjusting and seeing where guys go. I worry about Jalen Washington right now defensively. I think teams are kind of exploiting him a little bit. If they've got an athletic 4-man that he's guarding or an athletic 5, I think he's struggling with that a little bit. But he has done great, as a little bit of a rim protector, probably more so than Bacot because he's longer. Last question from Jeff Vance. Will there ever come a time that Hubert has Washington and Bacot on the floor at the same time? And his kind of inclination is to see if that helps rebounding. Talking about kind of the old Roy Williams 2-big system. I'll address that and then let y'all chime in too. I think it's tough because so much of the game now is not a 2-big system. I think it's one of the things that a lot of people were critical of Roy Williams that hit his career at the end of his career, where just playing 2 bigs all the time was getting he was putting his guys on islands against much more athletic 4s. And even some teams that were playing 5 out, it was a struggle. So I think the logic, I see where you're going, Jeff, is you've got logic of putting 2 more bigs in there to help own the glass. But by the same token, if you're having one of those guys have to guard out at 3-point line against an athletic 4, you're taking them away from the basket anyway, and that's going to hurt the rebounding that you put them in there for. Sean, you want to kind of follow up there? Is there something maybe I missed?
No, I mean, I think it could help defensively from a rebounding perspective, but I think I was always surprised when you did see Washington playing the 4, just from a agility standpoint, and unless it's going in for a specific 1 to 2 possessions and you can use them effectively. That's why I was saying Zayden High maybe a little earlier, just because I think from a agility and switching perspective, he offers a little more resistance, as well as just I think moves a little better. Where I'm fine keeping Washington as that backup 5, and if he can start to come along and be a little more consistent, perhaps you could see that, but I think it would have to be in very specific situations.
Sherrell, anything that we missed there? No? All right. You guys know what this last segment is. Thanks to our friends over at Congruity HR, your business optimized. Congruity is your next partner for your small or medium-sized business. I'm calling that a shot right now. They can help you take care of your human resources needs. They can help you with your benefits. The sort of administrative stuff that can really hold back a small or medium-sized business because you as a business owner or business manager want to be focusing on growth. Let Congruity help you there. Go to congruityhr.com/Tar Heels. They'll give you a free assessment to see how they might be able to help you. If they can't help you, they'll tell you they can't help you. But either way, you've got a free assessment and a potential team member that can come really clean that stuff up for you and help you, I guess, hone in and, to use their term, optimize how well your business is going. So check them out. We appreciate Congruity sponsorship. They're a national brand, but they're locally based and they want you to succeed, right? So check them out, congruityhr.com/Tar Heels. Get that free assessment. Find out how your business, small or medium size, can improve itself. All right. Give me 2 cents. Brought to you by Congruity. Sherrell, I'll go to you first.
The first thing I would say, Armando Bacot, I think people just need to be patient. I think maybe I don't want to say they're expecting too much of him. He knows he can play better, and I think he knows he needs to play better, but he's still a really good college big man. He's still averaging a double-double. He's had a rough couple of weeks, but I mean, there have been players in the recent past during their final seasons at Carolina who have had significant struggles for stretches, and then they got it together. I mean, look at Marcus Page's January of his senior year. Look at Kennedy Meeks's December and January of their senior years. I think you just have to give these guys a little bit of time. When I say a little bit of time, to play out of the slump that they're in. And I think Bacot will do that. So that's one. And two, obviously we haven't talked a lot about RJ Davis, who's playing at an incredible level offensively. I think was it 5 straight games now with 26
5 straight. Yeah.
Which is ridiculous. Another stat that we had help digging out, Brian Ives helped me dig this up. And I want to give a shout to Kenny Williams, who was on Justin Jackson's podcast, Shooting It Straight with Justin Jackson. He was like, yeah, RJ Davis is a guy who can give you 10 rebounds in a game, give you 30 points. And I was like, huh, how many players in Carolina history have
Can't
had
say
single
that.
games where they had 30 points in a game at one point in their career, 10 rebounds in a game at one point in their career, and 10 assists in one game at some point in their career? And so
That
I was
list
like,
ain't long,
Brian,
dude.
yeah, I was like, Brian, I know it's not been the last 20 years. I can tell you that off the top. I was like, but let's dig into it. And so he helped me, and we came up with a list. There's 4 guys who have done it in the history of Carolina basketball. That is, at least once in their career, they've had one game where they had 30 points. At least once in their career, they had one game where they had 10 rebounds. And at least once in their career, they had one game where they had 10 assists. The list is R.J. Davis, Walter Davis, Larry Miller, and Steve Bucknell. So that's the list. 4 times, 4 people in their careers in the history of Carolina basketball can say they've done that. So I think that shows the kind of player R.J. Davis has been in his 4 years at Carolina, and he's arguably playing the best he's ever played.
Yeah, it's crazy to see. And again, for me, it's not even just watching the scoring, it's watching how confident he is with the ball right now. It's just absurd, and it feels next level to see what he looks like when he gets the ball in any situation at this point in time. That stretch he had in the second half where North Carolina was struggling to get any stops. I mean, he was just might as well have been playing on the moon. He was so just far in the stratosphere. And to your point about Baycott, Sherrell, I want to point this out for the folks that are listening and folks in the chat. Armando Baycott's got a different cast around him right now. If you think about last year, everything worked through him. Well, North Carolina, fans and IC subscribers and stuff complained last year because nobody else was helping. Well, now you've got other people helping, and it's tough for people to adjust that. I mean, you can be frustrated with the numbers and all that too. I think just like Sherrell said, this team still has not played but 10 games together, and there's going to be some things that adjust on the fly. You know, last week we were talking about Cormac Ryan. I mean, it's hard for all of it to work at one time until it does. Sean, I'm going to ask you, man. Give me your 2 cents before we go. Brought to you by Congruity.
I'll stay on Armando just because I think that's been the topic with his 6 turnovers and only 4 shot attempts. So I went back and looked at all his made baskets in the tournament run just to see what was he doing then and what was he doing now. And I don't think there's a one thing to point to. I think one thing he can correct himself is he knows the refs are always looking at him a little bit differently. So there's no need to throw the shoulder in on the picks and basically take somebody's head off. They know people are going to be flopping a little bit more. So some of those self-enforced turnovers he can cut down on those. But I think there's no reason he should be taking 4 shots a game. I think he needs to do a better job. UNC needs to do a better job working to get him in positions. 1 to 2 could be the spin of the baseline, right hand hook, as long as he's not fading away. He does really well in space when he catches it, say from 17 feet, and can drive right, spin left. He didn't look that fluid when he did it against UConn, but I think that was more the position of the defender. You know, he does have a very strong left hand, so I would like to see him use that a little bit more. But just giving the ball, letting him make quick decisions, and if not, then you got to move it quickly instead of backing it out, dribble, and then here comes the turnover, fast break. The other thing,
Hang
he
on,
did hit.
stay there for a second, Sean. I'm sorry, I've stepped on you twice. My bad, dude.
No, all good.
Stay there for a second, because I think again, think about last year. He didn't have anybody that was reliable that he could reverse to, and oftentimes North Carolina's movement wasn't such that would allow him a good pass out or another option once he got a double team. I will say I've at least seen him recognize double teams when they're coming this year, which I think is again another evolution in his growth. But I agree with what you're getting at.
I mean, the only other thing with him, I don't mind if he takes one, face up jumper a game. He did hit. You went back to the tournament run and he hit 2 of those across those games. So it's not something you want him just settling for, or maybe taking a little off balance like he did against Villanova. But let him face up and that way he has a little more space. So I don't think you need him as the primary scorer. You have R.J. Davis for that, and ideally Cormac and Ingram filling in. But you do need, I think, to make him want to rebound the ball more offensively and defensively, and you can do that by, I think, getting him some better looks. And then Elliot Cadeau, I know we had talked about him kind of each game. You see him getting better, but really against that top competition, he's struggled against the size. He only took 2 shots against Kentucky. I think teams he hasn't taken a 3-pointer. So teams know what, hey, this is a great passer, but let's just play off him a little bit. So would love to see him look for a pull-up jumper just to get the defense off balance a little bit more. As well as once again just trying to get the ball in transition and make things happen. So I think with Oklahoma, as Sherrell mentioned, they're tough, they're physical, and I think his quickness can help create easier shots for the team in this game. So his ability to penetrate and take care of the ball is going to be really important against Oklahoma.
All right, fellas. Anything else y'all want to jump in on before we get out of here? No from Sherrell, no from Sean. Well, listen, I appreciate you guys being here. Shout out to everybody who's been in the chat with us, all you guys that have been dropping up some good comments. It's good to see. I think we'll try to do this live when we can. Usually, just as you know, we're recording with some of us on the right coast of the United States, some of us on the left coast of the United States, and that time difference, knowing that we all have kids, is tough to do sometimes. So we'll try to do these live when we're able. But if we don't, we hope you're enjoying the usual recorded versions as well. But we will not have a live show next week, and we will probably not have a recorded show next week because of the holidays. We'll see what we can muster up and let you guys know. But appreciate everybody being here. Shout out to Johnny T-Shirt for sponsoring us, to our friends at Congruity for sponsoring our 2 cents segment of the show. And for Sean Moran and Sherrell McMillan, if we don't talk to you again, I hope everybody has a great holiday. I hope you are surrounded by love and happiness and things that you like, and hope everybody just gets a chance to enjoy some stuff. And again, if you want to remember Eric Montross and want to honor his legacy a little bit, then go out and do something for somebody else tomorrow. Make this place that we live in a better place than it was when we got here. And I think that would probably be a great tribute and a great justice towards the legacy that Eric leaves behind. Thanks for being here. Until next time, this has been the Coast to Coast Podcast. I'm Joey Powell on InsideCarolina.com. We'll talk to you soon.